Come to the final session of today, panel discussion on the topic of the future of tall buildings in Asian cities. May I please invite Dr. Pennung Warnitchai to be the session chair for today.
We still have to wait for two more panelists. Dr. Naveed, please join the panel. And Mr. Boise. Before we start the panel discussion, I think I have to begin by introducing the panel members. And since I think you know most of them, because they are the speaker during this morning and this afternoon, Dr. Brahmanand Mohanty, Dr. Naveed Anwar, and Dr. Chiu. And we have a new member, Mr. Boise. You are not a new member. Mr. Boise is a new member. He's a chairman and president and CEO of SY Square Associate of Philippines. His company actually is taking care of the design of most of the tall buildings in Manila cities. So I think we will get many interesting ideas from him. He got his bachelor degree in civil engineering from University of Santo Tomas. He got a master in business administration and master of science in civil engineering from De La Salle University. He's actually a structural engineer working on the high strength concrete, high yield steel bar, top down construction for performance-based seismic design. I think that's a brief background for Mr. Boise. So with this, finishing the introduction part, let's start the panel discussion. I think the way I like to conduct this panel discussion is to start asking some questions to some panel member, but we'll let other members to join the discussion, okay, including the floor. If you like to express your view or make any comments, just raise your hand and then we have microphone and you can join. Okay. The topic for today's discussion set by Dr. Naveed is the future of tall buildings in Asian cities. This is a very broad topic, difficult to moderate. So I'm going to change it into more specific questions. Maybe I start with Dr. Naveed himself, which of course other members can join, and of course you from the floor can join as well. Starting from his presentation, that he showed that the trend around the world is we are now having urbanization, rapid urbanization. People are concentrated into the cities, and in the city we have more number of buildings, and buildings get taller. Okay, this is a trend, and the question is, will this trend continue? Continue into future, buildings get taller and taller. Yeah. Is this trend is sustainable? Is this trend is good for the society?
Yes. Okay, there are very many questions, but I think they're all interesting and something that I can... First of all, I think the reason the buildings are getting very taller are maybe not from the requirement of the occupancy. Many of them are symbolic in nature, and they are in a race. So we have to discount, in my opinion, the buildings which are not designed as a utility, from the utility point of view, but rather as a symbolic structure or a building. So those are few in number, and they are the ones who are actually getting very tall. But if you look at the average buildings in the cities, even in Dubai and in China and those cities also, the average, most of the buildings will still be under 100 stories. And maybe many of them under 60 or 50 to 60 stories. So I think, in my personal view, that part of the segment of the buildings, which is about 50, 60, 70, 80 stories, that will probably get more buildings will join that group rather than the super tall range. And the super tall range will probably continue the competition because everybody has to make something taller than the other. And probably, I don't know, in my personal opinion, it will probably stop at about 1,000 meters or something with the current system. That's my opinion.
I'm not exactly sure that you answered the question.
I think I did.
This is
the trend? No. The
taller?
Buildings will not get, yes, the symbolic.
There's no limit on that, right?
Yeah.
There's no limit at all?
I think there's a limit. With the current materials, with the current technologies of construction, of course, the elevators were one restriction on the buildings, which has been now removed to some extent. It was not a structural limit. Many people believe that the elevators are the ones that are keeping buildings short, not the structure. And now they have developed new technologies for elevators. So that limit probably, so there's going to be another leap after the new elevator technologies for buildings to get taller.
That the building can get taller.
Yes.
But you are not telling answer that it is a good.
It's not good.
Trend.
Probably, it's.
Or it is sustainable.
No, it cannot be sustainable because the super tall buildings probably cannot be sustainable, in my view.
I guess Mr. Boise can join the discussion because I think there are.
Yeah, I can actually speak for the Philippines because we're doing quite a number of projects in the Philippines. So I guess the trend now, the reason why there are actually a lot of buildings that are being built, or residential condo for that matter, in the Philippines, is that number one is the worsening traffic conditions. Most of the employees or startup families working in business district are actually living very far from the city itself. So what happens is that they were attracted to buy even a 18 or 21 square meter of condominium in the heart of the city just for them to be able to sleep overnight during Monday up to Friday, and then on the weekend they go back to their houses, which is actually far from the city. So because of this demand, now the developers are actually trying to target this market by way of putting up a lot of residential units now just to be able to cater to this market. Now the other thing is that the reason why they're putting up a super high-rise building right now in the Philippines is simply because of the appreciations of the land. Right now, the land in the Makati area actually appreciates some areas even appreciate about 100% per year, which is really crazy, So in terms of a cost, then the cost of the land becomes so expensive, the developers got no choice other than to build tall buildings, rather than just to be able to maximize now the cost of the land. So I'm saying that in the Philippines, we're still saying that me personally, I would say that it's exactly sustainable. I still believe for the next 10 years, we're still going to be doing all these numbers of buildings, because right now, in the pipelines, we're doing about something like about more than 200 buildings in the Philippines, as alone, as a structural engineer. Other professionals, I do not know yet. I do not know, but I'm saying I can speak for myself. So Ayala Land alone, the biggest developer in the Philippines, is actually allocating about $3 billion just for their full development. We're now doing the Four Casino Hotel in Manila, the cost of which is about $5 billion. So I'm saying all this, kind of really, drive the cost of the land within those, entertainment city really high. That will actually force the developers to put up, tall buildings than normal.
So I think what you are saying is this trend will continue.
In our country, it will continue.
And it is unavoidable because
Yes.
The cost of the land
Yes.
is
Getting higher and higher.
getting high, and this is happening.
Yeah.
Maybe not only Manila and many other.
Yeah, in the Philippines, basically within the key cities of the Philippines, even down in the south, in Mindanao, in Visayas, Cebu, everywhere is actually getting crazy in terms of the cost of land.
Greg, you want to join, or you want to ask question? I know that you want to be a moderator, but I'm not allowed you to do that this time.
I want a beer.
Okay, we'll come back to you, or you want to say something?
Well, I just have a comment. maybe two comments. The question, is it good? I don't know. Define good. Is it sustainable? Well, I think that's a different question. The development of normal high-rises may be essential to any community today, in the sense that our limited infrastructure, as my colleague noted, that it requires the vertical residential development and vertical commercial development. However, I think that also leads to the question as public policy and public policy regarding urban planning. I think the will of the government and the needs of the society will also drive whether we go vertically or horizontally. I spent about 13 years in Hong Kong, and when I first arrived in Hong Kong, the government had initiated the development of cities, new towns in the new territories, for those of you that know Hong Kong. And I took a look at the map and I visited these places, and I thought the government was crazy. They were in the middle of nowhere. There used to be small fishing villages. 13 years later, these old fishing villages are now serviced by heavy rail, light rail, minibuses, and the transportation is very, very good. And each of the communities is now a community within itself. 20 years ago, it used to take 1 day to go from the new territories to Hong Kong Island, and basically about 3 or 4 hours, and then about 3 or 4 hours going back. Today, you can get from the new territories quite easily down to Hong Kong Island in about 30 to 45 minutes. However, because of the development within the new territories, the need to go to Hong Kong Island and Kowloon has essentially been eliminated, where you can stay in the new towns, what we call the new towns, and just never go down to that urban center. The new urban centers have been developed through a government policy, development policy. Regarding super high-rises, I agree with my good friend Naveed on the sense that the super high-rises are a sense of ego rather than a sense of need. You take a Burj Khalifa, Shanghai Tower, Ping An Tower. These are in the order of 600 to 800 meters. And the occupancy is either mandated by a company, the government, or if they're left to the free markets, then you have the situation of Burj Khalifa, which was, 30% occupied for the first 3 years of existence. As a side note, when I was in school, I remember that the Japanese corporations, everybody remembers the super years of the mega Japanese development back in the 80s. And actually 1 kilometer structures, 1 kilometer buildings had been designed by each of the major Japanese construction companies. So you talk about Taisei, Kumagai, Obayashi. They actually had a complete set of drawings and specifications for 1 kilometer tall buildings.
Well, I'm not sure that I get your point, but the main thing is you are discussing about those kind of super tall buildings as well, and Naveed also mentioned this, and I also catch that in Europe the tallest building is only 300 meters tall, but in Asia we are building the mega tall, 600. In Middle East, they're up to 800. Okay, and the trend is going higher. This is not by the economic factor, but you are trying to say that this is because people want to build monuments or other iconic structure.
Sure. No doubt about that.
It's ego, pure ego.
Ego.
And the people who buy, and also the people who
Mike.
into those buildings, it's also the same thing. They just want to live in the tallest building, and and they're using that ego to charge 10 times more than they charge in Bangkok for per square meter. The cost of the space in Burj Khalifa is almost 8 times more than the cost in Bangkok for the same square meter.
There's nothing wrong with that. If they build this super tall and people are attracted to come to use these tall buildings, put a supercharge to that. But this is okay. It sounds reasonable, right?
No, but no, it's not reasonable because the people who are buying that are not going to live there. Many of them will just visit it once a year, twice a year. So it does not relate to the problem of the urbanization, does not relate to solve any of the issues that we are trying to build. The tall buildings are supposed to solve. That's why I'm saying that they are not. We must take them out of this whole discussion because they are something else. They're monuments, not buildings.
I know. I think Dr. Mohanty has many things to say. It's your turn now.
Well, I mean, to me, I was asked to talk about buildings, tall buildings. To me, tall buildings and sustainability are oxymorons. They don't go together, especially in the context of developing countries where city planning is very poor. You have a tall building, but you don't have a public transport service which is going along with the tall building. As a result, in the tall building, the number of people those who are living there, they will have that many number of cars. When you bring out those cars on the road, there is no road to go anywhere. So it's all about urban planning. And we know that private sector invests in these tall buildings, not the government. And public infrastructure is not coping up with that. What about energy supply? What about water supply? What about sanitation? And all that will not go along with it. So the question is, how do you find a middle path? How do you keep a balance? Having a tall, I won't comment on what has been already commented about the tall buildings. They don't really make sense in the long run. It's good to have these monuments like we had those monuments of the past, heritages. So the tall buildings are going to be heritages. But perhaps at a time when they will just remain idle as museum because the infrastructure will not be there to support them. And that's something that we need to keep in mind, especially I'm talking about countries like we heard about China and India, where you have a huge population. How many tall buildings can you construct? And where will you get the resources from? We already have a huge disparity between those who have and those who don't have. And you'll be saturating very soon with those who have. What about the others, those who don't have? So we need to think about those who don't have and construct cities to meet their requirements. And I think the good example was given about the new towns. It makes much more sense to make these satellite towns where you don't have to go very high rise, but you need to increase the density. You can't just go for individual houses like it has happened around Bangkok. It doesn't make sense for people to have 1 or 2 story buildings, houses which are 30, 40 kilometers away from Bangkok. People spend their time commuting between workplace and where they live. We need to find a just balance so that we don't have too high rise, so that we can manage with the resources that we have. We need to keep a balance between that. It should be affordable. As I said, the public infrastructure, we are not sure about how it's going to cope up with it. So when you're designing buildings, you need to think about it. I have a friend who constructs this, what he calls green buildings. His clients, he makes residential buildings. His clients come and ask him, why should we buy from you? He said, you don't have to buy from me. He said, you go and ask any of my competitors 3 questions. If they give you a satisfactory answer, go ahead with them. Don't come to me. The first thing is, what happens if there is no electricity in 10 years' time? What do I do about it? What happens if I don't get water supply for 3 days? We have seen what happened during the flooding time in Bangkok. If it had continued for a few more days, what would happen to the city? So imagine in tall buildings what will happen if you don't have the basic infrastructures. We need to think about future because you're building something which will last for 50 to 100 years. We can't think about building today. We have to think about the future and what will be the situation in future with the resource crunch and the public infrastructure which is falling behind.
I sense some negative feeling against tall building from you. You may be the only one who go against tall building. The other two are okay for tall buildings. For Greg, I'm not sure.
Did I say that?
You look strange to me all the time. But let's. No, I'm not going to allow you to talk. But let's shift it a little bit to green buildings, huh? Because I think we have to highlight on this issue. Because listening to your talk, it sounds like tall buildings are not green. It looks to me like tall buildings are red. They are not environmental friendly. It's consume very high energy. Okay, it's difficult to make them, I mean, really green. And you show kind of long list of measure and approach to make them more green.
Yes.
But really it can be green. Sounds to me that you still do not believe that it can be green.
Well, you know, what I mentioned was when you talk about sustainability, it is the journey. It's not the destination. Anything that we think is sustainable today is not sustainable in the future. We have to be in the bandwagon of sustainability. We have to start somewhere, and you have to follow the path. It's just like the sailor who is going on the sea to reach the horizon. And once you enjoy it, you enjoy the journey, then you look for new horizons. It's the same thing with sustainability. Unfortunately, we are in a trap. We don't believe that we can become sustainable. As a result, we are not going anywhere. So what I pointed out is green has various shades. Okay? We need to choose the right shade of green so that we know that we're going in the right direction.
But it cannot be dark green.
There is,
very light green.
to me, there is no ultimate, for example, take the case of, people talk about European Union having a policy, a visionary policy of 2020. They talk about the 20%, 3 times 20. 20% of energy efficiency, 20% of renewable energy, and 20% of renewable coming from electricity, electricity coming with renewable energy. Okay? And everybody in the world talks about the visionary statement of the European Union. What does it mean? By 2020, we'll have 20% from renewable energy, which means 80% is still going to be the dirty fossil fuel. And 2020 is not very far away. What does it mean in terms of our sustainability? How long have the humanity sustained on the earth?
But I cannot link to the tall buildings now.
It comes in the same way. If we construct something today which is not designed for the future, it's going to become obsolete. And we have had many monuments. We have had civilizations. They're not sustainable. And it's a question of putting the money where our ideas are. Today, there are many labels which have come up, the certification. And these are point systems. And they're not absolute terms. We need to talk about how do we go in absolute terms, how to do benchmarking, how to do better. Okay? The people talk about cost. They don't talk about what is the cost of land. The cost of building it may be very small compared to the cost of land. Okay? So when you're ready to pay so much more for the cost of land because that you want to be somewhere, we can definitely afford to put 5 to 10% more. And people have shown that many of the so-called green buildings have been able to divide their energy consumption by 2, water consumption by 2, just by putting maybe 5 to 10% more of money in the construction cost. And most of the developers don't see it from that side. They just look at the direct cost. They don't look at the indirect cost. And they're not really thinking about what type of services they can provide to their clients for the future. We are only talking about today.
Yeah, there are actually, there are some thoughts on the developer's mind regarding green building, because these are actually for sale. So the benefits which actually comes in form of maintenance, in the form of operational costs. At times the developers doesn't think about it because there's actually a penalty in putting up a green building. So they don't want to shoulder the initial cost, investment cost. And they were saying that anyway, the benefits is actually on the operational, on the maintenance cost. By then, the building's already totally sold out. So just leave that to the condominium core, and then we just put up the next building. So something like that. And I believe that's also the reason why not all developers are actually really getting very serious in terms of putting up a green building, because whatever the investment cost for that putting up a green building is actually passed on to the buyer, then it becomes actually a little bit less attractive in terms of sellability and viability, marketability, something like that.
Yes. No, but I think I agree with Moisi, what he's saying. But now I think the public awareness of this thing is increasing all the time. And many people are ready to pay a little bit premium if they can claim to live in especially the office, the corporate sector and other people, they would like to have, address with the green building and put it on their logo or whatever and claim that they are adding to the sustainability.
So
but
you are saying that it's a fashionable.
It's a fashionable thing, and it could be used as a. It could be used.
It cannot be realized in a massive scale. It is just the current trend.
Yes.
They go away.
Not so sure it will go away. I think not in the near future. And as long as there's a lot of talk on the climate change and all those things, probably it's not going to go away. And probably it will increase. And that may be...
Mohanty agree.
Yes?
They keep them in business.
Actually, yeah.
Yes, the last, I just wanted to comment on what was said, that the building cannot be completely green, and that's true as long as its location is wrong. And I have to refer to again the case of London, because the chief planner of London was making this presentation and talk about making tall buildings there and making them green. But see, in that city, he explained that only 5% of people drive to work in the city of London. 95% people use public transport, 70% come by the tube, another one by the... So if only 5% people are driving and coming, then in that city location, a green building by itself, which is green, can be sustainable because it's not generating any other negative effects on the environment. But if you place a building where everybody, like Dr. Mohanty said, has to drive there, then of course the cost, maybe the building itself is very green, but the total impact is not sustainable, not green. So that is, I think, very important, location and the infrastructure.
Greg, any comment? Because you can comment on anything.
That I can comment.
Please comment.
I think we should have some participation from the audience.
Yeah, I want to hear from the audience.
After Greg, then we ask the floor. Because, yeah, Greg, you comment first.
Oh,
Or no comment?
I have lots of comments. How much time do I have?
No, just 1 minute.
Well, I think urban planning comes down, like, as I mentioned earlier, urban planning becomes essential. And then the question is, what is the will of the people and the will of the government to actually enforce your urban planning, your urban planning? A good example is, I think, Hong Kong, where you sit there and the government said the heavy rail will go out to these towns, and they did. There are many examples where your government is not allowed to sit there and make such unilateral decisions. And if you can't do that, then you have the situation, as Dr. Mohanty mentioned, where you have development, but you have no transportation infrastructure to support it. A comment on the cost of land being much greater than the cost of construction. Again, we go back to Hong Kong, where the cost of the construction may be on the order of 10% of the cost of the land. In those cases, the developer doesn't care about the cost of construction. They really don't. So again, it comes down to urban planning and the government's regulations as to if the government says, thou shalt put in certain items into your development, the developers will put it in because the cost of the land being 90% of the cost of the total development costs. And they say they have to carry the money, carry the loans on the land, and the cost of construction is nothing.
I think that's interesting information. Cost of the construction is kind of very small, negligible,
Negligible.
compared to the cost of land.
Correct.
Cost of engineering and professional
It's nothing.
is negligible compared to the cost of construction.
Right.
So we are nobody.
We are nobody.
No, so the actual structural engineer or the engineering profession, the architects or the engineers, there's a building code, and the developer's instructions to the architect and the engineer are, I don't care what you design or what you put into the structure, as long as you can get it through the building approval process in the minimum amount of time on the first pass. So everything is over-designed. Everybody knows what the government regulations are, and they over-design it. For the simple reason that if the architect or engineer comes back and says, I can save you, Mr. Developer, 10% or 5% of the cost of construction, the developer says, are you crazy? You're going to cost me 2 to 3 weeks, and the cost of my loan for the property is going to be burnt on your savings in 1 day.
Okay, now we're back to the floor. you have questions or comments on this issue, please join the discussion. Yeah. Is there any comments or question from the floor? Actually, I think our topics are spreading now. Many issues now. But you can raise any issue that you like related to tall buildings, please.
Tallest building in our country is only 25 story up to now. So now we are planning to build maybe 30 or 35 or 36 story building. So in the case, we are learning a lot of technology from outside because in our country also they have no experience about tall building. So in that case, I have two questions. One is, so using the steel structure and RC structure, what is the difference for tall building? This is one question. So another question is for the fire safety, which is suitable, RC or structure? So this is another question. So one more question is for the ground foundation. So last session, so you explained about the different type of the perimeter pile or pole piling. So I want to know which is different, which is advantage between the perimeter pile and diaphragm wall. This is three questions, please.
The first question is about what?
So
what is
different
suitable
between
structure, steel or RC.
Yes, for the tall
The
building.
second question is about
So for the fire safety, fire
safety.
protection, yeah, which is steel is better or RC is better. So how to treat for the fire protection?
fire safety. And the last question is about
Last question
the
is
foundation system.
foundation system, perimeter pile and pole piling, perimeter pole pile and diaphragm wall.
Perimeter ball pile or diaphragm
Different,
wall.
yeah, different between. Which is better?
Who would like to respond?
Dr. Pennung.
Not me. I'm take a role of asking question. Dr. Mohanty, is a surprise you take this role?
My counter question to you is, do you really need to build 35-story buildings in Myanmar? Okay. If you look at the cases where there have been tall buildings, you have references as Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong. They are very small. Land is scarce. Okay? Hong Kong is a very good example. How many people know that less than 10% of Hong Kong is actually constructed? They leave 90% of green because people need to have that space. Okay? Singapore is the same case, very dense. We don't have to think about that in places where we have big countries. We have a lot of space. We need to think about how to keep a balance so that you have more construction in a manner that it benefits everybody. Just having a few high rises are not going to help. So my counter question to you is it really necessary to go for many high rise buildings? That's another question.
Even if he is convinced, his country colleagues may not be convinced. So they still want to build tall buildings. So the question come back to Mr. Boise, Dr. Naveed.
On RC or steel, it really depends. Now, like for example, if the labor is actually relatively cheap, then I believe RC is actually applicable, much viable. No? But if the labor becomes too expensive already, then I believe you can actually go to structural steel. And also, like in the Philippines, steel was never actually used for tall buildings in the Philippines, simply because, number one, steel is actually imported in the Philippines. It's actually very expensive. Concrete or cement is locally produced, so we have actually a lot of local laborers that is actually very familiar with the RC construction. But right now, since the availability of China-made structural steel sections, now it becomes competitive already. And also the rising cost of the labor in the Philippines is becoming so high already that some tall buildings now are actually doing a hybrid, wherein the core is actually of concrete, and then the perimeter frames as well as the gravity joists are actually made of steel. So it becomes actually the balance between the cost of steel as well as the labor, also the capabilities of the local labor force.
But for the condition of Myanmar now, they just open the country. Do you think importing the steel from abroad, build up their own steel industry, will be competitive to, RC construction?
I'm not really familiar about Myanmar, so I cannot actually talk about that, in terms of what is. Yeah, in general, I believe so. I believe so. No, like for example, before when we were actually importing, steel from Russia as well as from other countries in Europe as well as US, they're so expensive. Now, since steel is actually being produced in China, they become so competitive. Even the local steel fabricator cannot even compete with the China distributor supplier.
Yeah, I think Boyce is absolutely right, and I will just add to that 2 or 3 things. One is, of course, related to the skill, because we have seen Bangladesh is one example that we have been working in the last few years, where 2 or 3 steel manufacturers are now driving the kind of flag to make buildings in steel, because they have imported these huge plants and they have the capability to construct sections and all kinds of things, and so they have this huge supply of steel. So now they are trying to go and convince the builders. They're developing the capability to design and build them. So that, I think, goes hand in hand. And they have demonstrated, based on the speed, they will win over concrete anytime, as you can see. So they can build it very quickly. And they have automated factories that produce the sections, locally from the plates. They build any section that you want. So that industry is actually driving the construction of tall buildings in steel. And because we are involved in a few of those projects and training their people on design. The other thing I also agree is the lack of skills and knowledge on the steel building is much less than concrete. Concrete, most engineers are familiar. So all of that contributes to that. But in net effect, it's difficult to say which is cheaper, which is better at this time. But if I have to make a guess, I would say concrete at this time. For Myanmar, it's better. For Myanmar. Yes. Yeah. For Myanmar, yes.
I also personally believe that it will be concrete. Okay, I'm not allowed to make comments.
Just for your information, this time one of the master students from Myanmar in AIT is doing research on this hybrid model that Mr. Boyce has mentioned, in which the core is concrete for Myanmar, especially as a research topic, to study whether a hybrid model building of about 30 stories will be feasible in Myanmar or not. So I will be able to tell you the result after about 6 months or 7 months.
Any other question? We still have 2 more questions about fire safety issue and foundation. Nobody want to answer?
Fire safety, I think there's provisions in the code that whenever you use the structural steel, you just have to put additional, fire safety, coating. No? And again, that actually adds on to the cost. Whereas if it is actually concrete, then you actually have a built-in, fire-rated, materials, no? And also at the same time, you just cannot leave your columns exposed even with this fireproofing coating. You need to have to clad them with some architectural board or whatever that actually, again, will actually increase further the cost. So in terms of safety, I still believe that if it is actually properly protected, it still can actually be as good as concrete in terms of a fire rating. I think the question is regarding the secant pile, the series of board piles versus that of a diaphragm wall. Now, if I may actually talk about in terms of real applications to real building. Now, for example, for buildings in the urban areas, if you put in a temporary, I still believe the secant or the series of board piles are actually more of a temporary retaining structure, because you have to put in an additional wall for you to envelope your basement. You cannot actually, you don't want to have a wall on your basement with all those exposed piles. But for a diaphragm wall, it is actually easy just to treat the surface, and at the same time, I believe it is actually better to, or rather easier to put some tie-back anchors during excavation process rather than the secant pile.
Any other question from the floor? Okay. Then one more.
Sorry, Sunny from Singapore. Just a quick question about the green buildings.
About the green building.
In Thailand, is there any particular green rating system that you are actually subscribing to? For example, BREEAM from the UK, LEED from the US. In Singapore we have Green Star and Green Mark from Singapore and Green Star from Australia. Is there any particular green rating system that you are actually, Thailand in particular is actually adhered to?
Dr. Mohanty?
There is one which has been developed very recently, but I think still Green Mark is more popular here than the local one. It's called CA. Yes. The point is again, these type of systems have what they call points, and the developer picks and chooses the ones which are easy to get, and there is no absolute terms. Unless we benchmark them, unless we improve, we just get points, and because it's a way of selling their properties. It's not so much about really greening it. It's because it makes more business sense. So unless we come up with the standards, and unfortunately the national standards or the codes are very lax. They're very easily achievable. Okay? They're minimum standards. Unless the private sector comes up with good standards and talk about the numbers. I mentioned about a few numbers there. Okay? And we need to compare with those numbers. I talked about 250 kilowatt hour. In Malaysia, it's 210 kilowatt hour per meter square per year. But just compare that with the numbers that you'll get for low-rise buildings. What is the average energy consumption per household per year? You'll see the huge differences that are there. A hotel may be consuming 50 to 100 times more per person night than a local house. So that is the type of differences that we're talking about. Unless we make those changes, okay? I'm talking about real radical changes. It will not happen by just tinkering with this type of standards or green mark, etc. We need to have deep changes. I mean, one of the things that we talk about, we live in a climate, if you go out here, the ambient temperature is 35 degrees, 70%, 80% humidity. Why are we dressed like this? Okay? The day we say that, come like you are wearing your dress, come like this because we are going to keep the temperature up by 3 degrees, things are going to change. Unless we do that, we're still talking about different shades of green. Yep.
Dr. Mohanty, sounds that even we adopt all the measures that you mentioned, that the current trend like a passive design feature, bioclimatic design, integrating light and cooling, and many other measures, we still cannot compete in terms with the conventional low-rise, mid-rise building in terms of energy efficient or greenness of the building. We cannot.
That's why I started with the first slide you would have seen, or net zero building that we had in the past. So,
but there are the people in the tall building industry that they believe that having the city located like a vertical cities is more efficiency than having them spread horizontally.
True. I'm talking about a mid-path. I'm not talking about a few high-rise. I'm talking about increasing the general height of the buildings in the city. Two are somewhere in between. Not too tall, not 1 or 2 story buildings, somewhere in between. And Europe is a very good example. Most of the European cities don't have tall buildings. But right from the beginning, because the urban planning was such that they provided neighborhood concepts. Okay? They had good public transport facility. Any European city you go today have good facilities. People can walk to many places. Okay? We have this neighborhood concept. Unless we bring that in, we just put a few high-rise, it's not going to solve the problem. We need to go taller, but there is a limit to that. How do you keep a balance between the two? I'm talking about the middle path, where you can't go to 1 or 2 story buildings. I mean, I was in Cambodia when this 42 story building came up, around buildings which are hardly 1 or 2 stories. It's like an eyesore. Okay? But the government permitted it. Unless you come up with the right legislation, you just have these eyesores coming out because, of course, they're a pride to say that I have a building here which is 42 stories. But around you, what do you see? When you look out of the window, you see slums. Okay, so how do you keep a balance? How do you allow people to go up to a certain level? And at the same time, develop the overall urban infrastructure, proper urban planning. Without urban planning, a good transportation system. I think Bangkok is 25 years behind in terms of public transport. If that was there, it would have developed in a totally different manner. Today, who is already on a vehicle will think 10 times before shifting from the vehicle to go to the public transport system. Okay? So how do you make sure that people don't go? In Europe, people don't take a pride in having a vehicle. Okay? So how do you bring that, the lifestyle changes saying that I don't own a vehicle, I don't need to own a vehicle, because I live in a place where I can walk to many of the places nearby, I can do many things. And if I want to go somewhere else, like in the case of Hong Kong, I have a good public transport to go from one point to another.
Okay, I think I'm trying to close the panel discussion by asking maybe the last question, last issue. Oh, we have a question from the floor, please.
So I came from Myanmar. So I would like to share my experience. One thing is in Myanmar, actually what you said is right. We have a lot of lands. But one thing, unfortunately, is our land prices are very high as Bangkok and Singapore. So that's why we have to use the high rise. This is one of the points. Then another thing is our transport systems are not very good. So those people who want to come to the downtown, it takes really time. So people, they want to stay in the downtown. So that's why Myanmar, we are planning for high rise. Actually, in my opinion, this is not the right time. But unfortunately, we have no choice. That's one thing. The second, I would like to share this about the diaphragm wall and bore pipe. So through my experience, this is based on the soil type. Because some of the area very close to the river sites and then the groundwater is very near, so it is good to use diaphragm wall, especially there is a basement structures. So this diaphragm wall and a bore pipe is a place to place, and what we are going to construct. Based on that, we are selecting these two items. Thank you.
Any comment from the panel?
Yeah, I can understand your compulsion to go high rise, but just thinking today, what is the electricity situation in Myanmar? Which means when you're putting up a building, you also have to provide your own electricity. You have to make sure that you have your own water. You can't depend on the municipal water supply. You can't depend on the electricity company. So which means you have to prepare for your own future. So, and when you do that, automatically you'll find that you will make your buildings green, because by doing that, you're going to divide your energy consumption or water consumption by 3 to 4 times. Okay? You can afford to put sensor-based taps and still save money because you have to supply your own water. Okay? And this is what many people don't understand when you put up buildings in cities where you have a good infrastructure, you don't feel it. But in a country like Myanmar, a developer has to think about that. If they don't think, in a few years to come, there will be big challenges.
Yeah, what you said is right. But, last year, we have tourists, they double up. So some of the tourists, they came to Myanmar and they cannot get the room. For example, like then, they have to sleep. Some people in the roadside and some they stay in monasteries. That's really happen. So I'm producing these precast factories, and like we have to construct many hotels. We have to complete by the end of this year. There's a lot of people, they want to construct many things. Actually, what you said is right. We have not proper infrastructure. So electricity also very poor, and electricity breakdown. Then in elevator, many people stuck. Then we have to warn. Oh, don't worry. This is very common. So we are very used to that. So I should say, in around the world, many people they have no electricity and they are very frightened. In Myanmar, we are very used to, and I feel that not much problem.
I think that continue with this trend, you construct more high-rise buildings, it will consume much more energy, and you may not be able to meet this demand. And your, serious energy shortage will become even more serious.
I feel that the construction of the high-rise will be in one stage. Maybe within 3 to 4 years. Maybe they will gradually slow down because the supply and demand. When they meet. Because currently is the country start open and a lot of visitors came and we don't have enough rooms. That's make we need high-rise. Another reason is that we have a very high price of the land. This is the one reason.
If there is a continued development of high-rise building in Myanmar, it will stop selling electricity to Thailand and use that for themselves.
That's the next generation's problem.
Yeah, I love you are a real businessman.
Maybe the last question is about for Greg. Because I tried to catch his presentation. I still do not understand what he presented. But I think he criticized the current engineering practice or professional practice. We do not get as much money as we deserve. You propose kind of a new model, new financial model.
How many developers are in the room? Developers, property developers. Oh no, you have to close yours. No, it's not that it's the wrong financial model, Pennung. It's just that I think the tools that we have as scientists and engineers allow us to spend time thinking about how best to apply these tools to problems. And instead of thinking about how to apply the tools to problems, we're spending time playing with the tools. So if we remain as design professionals serving our clients, then it behooves us to provide professional services for which we can be proud of that we use professional knowledge, as compared with delivering the same products as we have been delivering, just in a shorter period of time. Does that answer your question?
No, it doesn't. It does. Yes. Okay.
Dr. Naveed, does it make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Perfect sense. Honestly, it does.
Okay, yes. Good enough. So before we close, is there any question? Yeah, please, from the floor.
I'm from the Philippines, and I would like to take a look at the viability of high-rise buildings in the context of time, and physical space. So it's like there was a time when the age of space travel is not upon us, but we say here that is high-rise buildings really viable, sustainable? And when we ask this question, it is kind of at which time, in which place? Because eventually, different places of the world or urban centers will be built up, and the surface of the earth is a finite space, and as opposed to the airspace, which is pretty much more. It's also it might be finite, but in our mind it's quite bigger. And when you talk about sustainability, my simple understanding, because I'm not a green building guy, is that one of the key issues of sustainability is we build for the needs of the day, so that the needs of future generations will not be taken away from them. So when we build high-rise buildings in a small space, we take away only small space of the surface of the earth. And in my own belief, and this is not very technical, I think, between the air and soil is not perfectly renewable, in the sense that when you build on the soil, the same soil that you build upon, and you take down your building, let's say half a century from now, or a century from now, that same soil whereupon you once built a building is no forest can grow on it anymore, or maybe some other usages of that space is no longer the same as it was before 50 years ago. So our case in Manila is in the Philippines is that I think the viability has to be measured on the context of multiple factors. For example, what we have been seeing in Metro Manila, about 20 million in population, is there is right now at least 5 major CBDs already in place. 5 major CBDs already in place, separated by very bad roads. So in the present context, the government has to do its part. 5 CBDs now, maybe 7 or 8 or 9 CBDs years from now, and these CBDs, all high-rise buildings, will have to be connected by good infrastructure. The buildings is an effort of the private sector, but the road has to be built by the government. So, even if by itself, the present, I would say present, in the context of time, the present viability of high-rise buildings in Metro Manila is reasonably high, partly because of the demand also of the population. As Mr. Chiu was saying, and that includes me, people who are working in the CBDs would like to live in the CBDs. At least you have a house in the CBD, you have a condo in the CBD, maybe you have a house 100 miles away. So I save time, I save money, I save gasoline, and then you have time to work out after office. That is the viability of the high-rise buildings. But now, the government should come in to increase the viability, because this is the viability of in terms of commercial aspect. But in terms of optimizing the usefulness of the high-rise buildings in terms of sustainability, because with high-rise buildings, with newly built-up CBDs, you have integrated systems, utilities, and that also works well for the high-rise buildings. So when you house 1 million people, let's say in medium, especially low-rise buildings, you're taking away a lot of space. I'm not saying that this is bad. No, what I'm saying is it depends on the physical character of the country or the city we're talking about, or it depends on the available space. It depends on the population density, and that is to be defined. The task of the engineers and the scientists is to find out how this can be optimized in such a way that sustainability will not be compromised. Thank you.
Thank you. I take it as a comment from the floor, and I think we have already discussed many issues. The time is running out, and I hope you all enjoy the panel discussion. I'd like to thank all the panel members I'd like to thank the audience for staying with us until the end. Thank you very much.
I will just take 2 or 3 minutes to close today's session. And on behalf of AIT and the organizers, AIT Consulting, we would like to sincerely thank everyone for sparing their time to come and who accepted our invitation and come and listen to the presentations. And we sincerely hope that these presentations have given some idea about what is happening in the field of tall buildings from various angles, from various aspects, and also some allied disciplines and allied technologies that are being developed. So if you have any further questions after this one, any other queries that you would like to discuss with us, any ideas that you would like to follow through, please feel free to contact us. Our contacts is in the folder that has been given to you. And we'll be very happy to follow up with you on any of your questions or any of your comments or your needs. And also, as it was mentioned in the morning, we will put up all of these presentations with the permission of the authors on our website, which is dedicated to the technology event, probably from Monday onwards. So when you go back, please do visit the site, and then if you like, you can download those presentations. So with those comments, I would like to thank everyone once again, all the speakers, our panelists, and our guests, especially from abroad. They took the time to travel, and we are very glad that they could be here. And the participation is very good. It is more than what we expected in the beginning, so we are very glad. Thank you so much.